Hey guys, I'm just sitting here real early in the morning on a Thursday. It's about 1:44. I should be in the bed because work comes in about 4 hours and 20 minutes. Well, that's when I gotta get up. But anyways, I'm just sitting here and I got my mind on the MAME cab, and there's just some things I want to get done. So I'm sitting here working on the joystick positioning right now. And I've got the base off some Happ Competitions I have, and these are some used Happ Competitions, but this is what I'm going to use for the MAME cabinet. I got them in a box of joysticks back when I got a Gauntlet Legends board set, probably about 3 years ago, and I just salvaged these out of there. There's enough parts in there I could make 2 good competition joysticks, and they had the blue tops, and these were almost new looking. They still got a lot of texture on them, and I said, well, I want to salvage them. I'm not going to go spend $10 a piece on a couple of new ones. I'm just going to use these. If they wear out, I want to have them set up to bolt another set of competitions right in. I could buy a new set if I want to, but I want to salvage these. All my buttons are new and stuff like that, so I don't mind putting a little bit of used stuff in the main cab. But I've got the base of the joystick positioned perfectly right now on this side. It's centered right over the joystick hole, and what I did is I set the base down and I just kept holding it up and looking under it while the base was resting on it until I got it to where the middle of the where the shaft goes for the joystick is dead center on the 1 1/8 inch hole on the other side. And I mean, I didn't do any measurement to do that. I just eyeballed it, and I mean, it's so close. You can see the circle on the other side is just a little smaller than the 1 1/8 inch hole, so you just center it up as good as you can, because you want the joystick to have free movement, left, right, up and down, diagonal and all. You don't want it to be too close to one side of that 1 1/8 inch hole and to be bumping. It'll restrict your movement. And even if you're slightly off center, you're still not going to bump the sides of those the side of the 1 1/8 inch hole, because that's pretty much about the way it is in Mortal Kombat's, and it doesn't bump the sides. Even though it's dead center, it has a little bit of extra room. But I think we are dead center now, and just to kind of confirm, I just made sure that I just took a measurement from here down to the edge of the control panel, and from here down to the edge of the control panel, made sure they were even, and the same on the top up to the edge. I measured off of each corner, measured up, made sure they were even measurements, and then I measured from the side of the control panel. And my measurements and my cuts may be off slightly, but I wanted to make sure I was within about a 1/16 of an inch, to make sure that not only do we have the hole centered for the joystick, but we don't want the base cocked, kind of funny or anything. We want it, good and square with the control panel top, So we've got it in position, and I was going to mark it, but instead of marking, I think what I'm going to do is just hold it in place real firmly, and I'm going to go ahead and drill the holes out that I need, and those holes are going to be drilled all the way through, because on the other side we're going to install these T-nuts, and they're going to be tapped down into the surface, and on this side the bolts will go through the joystick base and run up into the T-nuts. And I got me a 7/32 drill bit out of my kit here, and I took the shank of it and put it down through the holes that we're going to use, our mounting holes at the corners, and it is a very snug fit, but it drops down in there with no room around it. And also compared that to the T-nut, and the T-nut let me see if I can show you here. The T-nut there, that part of the T-nut is dead on with the size of the shaft of the drill bit, the 7/32. Can't hold it up with one hand, but anyway, those are the exact same diameter on the shaft of the drill bit and the T-nut, and they both fit just real snugly down into those holes there in the base of the joystick. So I'm just going to use the base of the joystick as kind of a template and just carefully drill straight down, and that'll help hold my drill bit kind of square to the work also. And as long as I don't force it left or right, I shouldn't really eat up any plastic on the base. But even if I do, I've got a couple more competition bases that was in that box of crazy joysticks that I got a few years ago, and this was just one of them that I thought had a little bit better micro switches on it. But anyway, we're going to take and drill these 4 out. We're going to drill all the way through, and then we're going to flip the panel over, and we're going to take a spade bit and just make a very slight recess for the thickness of the T-nut. It has probably a 32nd of an inch is all it has for its thickness, but I don't want that sticking up at all because I don't want little round circles to be seen from the top under the artwork. So just barely going to hit it with a spade bit, and I think it was I measured it a second ago. This is the paddle bit that we need, 5/8, yeah. So we're going to use a 5/8 paddle bit there, and that'll make our recess. That's the about the exact size of the width of the T-nut. We might go slightly larger just to give the T-nut just a little extra room around it so we're not just forcing it into one position there. But we'll be back in a second after we've drilled the holes. Okay guys, we got our 4 bolt holes drilled, and we just used the base of the joystick as a template. And I was just real careful each time I drilled a hole to make sure that I didn't move the base. And after the first 2 holes, I started taking the drill bit out of the drill, and I just take the smooth shaft of that off the the back of the shaft and just slide it in between the joystick base and the holes just to make sure it was perfectly lined up with the previous holes. That way the 3rd and the 4th hole wouldn't somehow get off track. So it's all perfectly lined up. They all line up okay. There's the top, and of course a couple of them they just chipped out a little bit when they tore through. No big problem, because we're going to come back and we're actually going to widen these on top anyway for the T-nuts to recess down into. So this is going to open this up about the size of a dime or so on each one. These actually didn't hardly chip at all, but it just splintered a little bit there. But we're about to come back and do even more damage there anyway. But after we get that one and it seems like our process worked okay, we'll come back and get the other joystick hole. Okay guys, got all 4 of them done. I just barely had to move the paddle bit, just maybe a few rounds, and it took out just probably less than the thickness of a dime. These are only probably a 32nd of an inch thick, probably not even a 16th of an inch. And I just flipped them over on their back and made sure the thickness of it looked like it was being covered by the indentation of what I had drilled out. And if it looked pretty good, I just flipped them back over and just mashed them into place slightly. And we're going to tap these on down into place, either that or go ahead and fasten the joystick base around the other side and tighten it down. And when you do tighten it down, most likely it's going to draw these in good and tight to the board, but we want them good and flush before we put the artwork on. But the next one we may wait and do tomorrow, because it's going on 2:30 and I need to get into bed because I got work tomorrow. So we know the process, we know how to do it, so we might fasten the base to this one and just stop and get the other one tomorrow. Okay guys, I went ahead and mounted the one joystick that I had the holes prepared for, and worked out really great. I went ahead and used washers. These are black Allen screws or bolts that came with the T-nuts. Like I said, I ordered those on eBay, and I think they were actually being sold for people who were trying to build their own speaker kits for stuff for like if they were making their own speakers or amplifiers and stuff for guitars and musical instruments and stuff. But they had different sizes, and I just happened to find a combination that was the exact size, the exact thread pitch, everything like on a Mortal Kombat. The only difference was, instead of having a Phillips head and being silver, it was the Allen head, and they were black. And I think maybe the T-nuts might be not quite as heavy duty as the ones that come from the factory on a Mortal Kombat, but they're still plenty strong for this, because you've got 4 of them mounted, and this feels really good and strong. But I went ahead and I used silver washers on these, because the heads of the Allen screws, they are just a little small for my liking. It feels like if you was to really tighten them tight, that it might sink down into or mar into the plastic from the base, because it has a hole that's just a little loose around the bolt, and these heads aren't much bigger than the bolt threads. So I said, well, I'm just going to put a washer on there just to give a little extra security and a little better grab on the base. But we tightened those down really good, and when we did, it flushed up our T-nuts on top. If you can take a look, if you look across the board, so you don't have to worry about anything sticking up and bothering the artwork. Those are down under the surface, just barely, no more than a 32nd of an inch under probably. but it pulled them on down into the little grooves that we drilled, and the bolts stopped. I mean, dead perfect. I couldn't ask anything better. As soon as I got the joystick real good and tight, the ends of the bolts stopped right before they started coming up out of the T-nuts on all 4 of them. So they look completely even, and I just went ahead and just put the stick in. Feels good and tight. Has full range of movement. I don't think it's bumping the wood very much or anything. It's activating all the switches. And the more I look at it, I guess these dust washers aren't too bad. I might leave the dust washers on top. If not, I'll come back at a later time and I'll put these on top of the surface of the base for the joystick, because on the base of these joysticks, let me show you. On the base of these joysticks, you see there's a recess right there. That recess is the same or slightly more thickness than the dust washer. So the dust washer does have room for a little bit of concealment there. If you want to mount these underneath the board, you can leave that on there underneath the board and insert your stick from the top, and you'll have a dust washer on there. But you'll see a little more of the stick. It looks a little bit gaudy, and you'll see the inside of the wood, like if it's 3/4 inch, that's about the thickness of this. You'll kind of see that. You might be able to, like, you know, paint your stick so you don't see that little bit of silver showing there. You can paint it black, and you can paint the inside of the holes that you've drilled there. You can paint those black, or put some type of grommet in there. I'm not sure, but I just don't know if mounting them like that is going to look good since you're mounting them through such a thick control panel. Now, if you're mounting it under some type of metal control panel, it would probably be ideal for something like that. But these sticks would stick up awful high. But I just, you know, I really kind of wished I would get a recess routed out in these for the dust washers, but like I say, to do that, I would have to find a way to put the artwork over it without it, you know, the artwork sticking to it. The only thing I could think would be to make something like a circle, maybe a little larger than the dust washer, that will just be large enough to cover its full range of movement there. See how it moves? It probably moves about a little less than ½ an inch either side and up and down, so you would have to have a circular area that covered that range of movement, and you would have to have like a very small piece of plastic or something to stick underneath the artwork to the adhesive so it wouldn't stick to the dust washer even if this was in a recess. Because if you put that adhesive, that 3M adhesive backed artwork on here, and this is in a recess, then once it starts moving around, it's still going to get stuck to your artwork, and it's going to freeze up on you. It's going to mess your artwork up probably. So I mean, it's probably other ways to do that and get around it. I don't know. You could make it very thin Lexan or plastic, or even very thin sheet metal cover to go over the whole thing after you make your recesses, and then put your artwork over that. But it just seems like a lot of hassle to go through. So, but anyway, I want you guys to see that looking good. We'll get the other one done tomorrow. Okay guys, it's the next day. We've installed the first joystick. I'm coming back to install this second one here, and I'm just using a little masking tape there to help me when I'm trying to line it up. I got it pretty much on the spot that I want, and I had 2 pieces of masking tape. I just removed the first one. When I got it where I thought it was dead center, so that when I looked at the underside of the control panel, it looked like the hole in the center here was dead center of the 1 1/8 inch hole that's drilled through the control panel. I just kind of taped it in place temporarily, and I put some tiny pencil marks near the corners on each side, upper, lower, left, and right. So there's some little tiny, I think you can see them there. Yeah, you can see them. I got them on the upper, lower, and the left and the right sides there. Can't see those too good, but they're there. And that's just in case I get off my mark. And when you're drilling through here and you're using the base as a guide, if the drill bit bumps it, or if you lean the drill, it is going to move that base around a little bit. But if you don't use too much force and you don't fight against it too much, the drill bit kind of wants to go straight through. So try to use even pressure pushing straight down, and just kind of watch as you start drilling to make sure that you look like you're perpendicular with the piece of work that you're drilling through. So just do your best. If you have a drill press, I mean, excellent. I'd love to have a drill press, but I don't have anywhere to store one, even if I had one right now. My table saw is out on the porch. Maybe one day in the future, if I get a building outside that I can put all my tools in, then I can get a drill press and a bandsaw and all that nice fun stuff. But right now we're making do with just our hand drill, and we're just being careful. Do one hole at a time. Probably the most important thing is that once you start that first hole and you get it done, keep all the other 3 lined up with it. We're going to go ahead and do the first hole now. I just figured I'd let you guys see some of this. When you're doing it, try to hold the base with your hand without moving your hand around. Just put downward pressure against it so that anything on the base that is against the wood will get a little bit of friction there. And don't slide your hand left or right. Just keep downward pressure on it. Now I want to change up the way I'm doing this slightly. Instead of drilling the hole all the way through, I'm going to go ahead and move the drill bit to the next hole. And what I'm doing is just taking maybe an 1/8 of an inch of material out of the hole that we're drilling on each one. And that way, if as I punch through with the drill, it moves the base around, it'll be a lot easier to realign it because I have the start of each hole already done. And if it's going to move when the drill bit's going through, it's most likely going to be when you're punching through each separate layer of a layer of plywood, or when you punch through the other side and the drill bit goes through. That's probably when you're going to accidentally wiggle the base. So we'll just go ahead and drill through maybe 1/8 to no more than 1/4, probably not even that deep, probably about 1/8 of an inch, and that will mark our holes. And to be honest, if you were careful, you could probably remove the base at that point and finish drilling the holes through, but we're going to keep it in place because it kind of gives us a little thickness from that plastic to keep the drill bit perpendicular to the piece of wood. Okay, we're going to remove the piece of tape from the bottom. Now the only thing keeping us on our marks is the pencil marks that we're able to see that I've made, and the 2 holes that we've started to drill. Pencil marks should be adequate. And we'll do the last one. I'm just turning my chair that the work's on. Hopefully I'm still in view there. I'm just checking before I start, make sure I look perpendicular. Okay guys, I have the bolt holes drilled For the other joystick, this is the finished side where we're going to have our sticker on, or our decal for the control panel overlay. This one right here tried to chip just a little bit. It's just where it had some loose splintering and stuff like that on the surface. I probably should have sanded it just a little more in this area, but when it broke through, it just chipped a little, which isn't hurting anything, because we're going to come back and we're going to do almost 1/2 inch wide with the paddle bit there. So the only thing you'll see, you might see a little splinter there, but as long as it doesn't gouge out the top or anything, it's not going to hurt the control panel overlay. Plus the control panel overlay, it's like a 32 of an inch thick or something, or maybe even a little more, so it's going to cover up very small imperfections anyway. But right now we've got to come back with the paddle bit. Let's see, 5/8, and the 5/8 paddle bit is going to make our recesses for our T-nut, so we're going to do that now. Get a T-nut out and just see how it sits in there. That'll be just fine, ain't no problem at all. Really, it's not going to matter even if you drill it a little deeper. If you go too deep. What matters is the length of the bolt. The length of the bolt, you want to make sure that the thickness of the plate for the joystick and the thickness of the control panel is not less than what the length of the bolt is. And if you stick with that, the bolt's not going to pop out the other side if you're using these T-nuts. I mean, you could have those perfectly flush, or you could have them halfway into the board. The tip of the bolt is still not going to come through the top of the control panel if it's no longer than the thickness of the control panel and the thickness of the base of the joystick. So it's just kind of a rule to stick to, unless you just, really torque down on it and, put an imprint into the plastic on the base or something. It should be a pretty good rule to follow with that kind of stuff. So we've got 3 others to do. I'm going to do those off camera. Okay guys, we got all the recesses done. I went ahead and cleaned it up with the vacuum. And I was going to insert the T-nuts, but what I want to do is put the base of the joystick on the back first and drop the bolts through, and that way when the T-nuts drop down to their locations, it will keep the bolts from being like slightly angled or anything. If I go ahead and place those T-nuts in place and mash them down, then if there's any little bit that it might want to move, 32 or 16th of an inch to make it a little less angled from the base plate of the joystick through the control panel into the T-nut, it will correct itself better if I don't have those T-nuts flushed all the way down, if I just have them loose until I start tightening it, and I have all 4 of them in. So that's why I'm going to do this one. The other one didn't seem to be too much of a problem doing it that way the first time, but I think my joystick base moved just slightly when I was drilling these holes, and I want to give it a little leniency as I'm tightening those bolts. So we'll do that and we'll come back and show you if it worked out okay. Okay guys, we got that fully installed. That's the one we just did. Here's the one we did last night. Both looking nice and factory. Looks very much like a professional control panel the way it's set up, I think. Now we'll have to take the sticks back out and apply the artwork. Hopefully we'll get to that today. I can't think of too much more besides the T-molding that needs to go on the control panel. We've got the artwork, we've got the T-molding, and we have the Lexan or plexiglass cover. Probably going to go ahead and do the artwork and the T-molding, just see how it looks. And I think the way I set the T-molding, it'll be just high enough to cover the edge of the artwork to keep it from peeling off. But I got to figure out how I'm going to cut that, because I made it just slightly larger than the control panel. I think I'm going to use the trim router bit. I think that it is probably sharp enough that it can run around the edge and cut that artwork without damaging it. I'm hoping so. If not, I may do a test on the bottom part, because I think the bottom part hangs over 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch, and I might line it up on something with a straight edge and just see how it cuts just a little bit of it. And if it does real good, we'll use that. If not, we may still try to use it, but we may wait till we get a piece of plexiglass and sandwich the artwork underneath the plexiglass and cut through both of them at the same time. And with that added piece of plexiglass on top mashing down, it'll probably keep the artwork from being damaged, and the bit can cut through it. I'm just worried that if we just apply it to it and then run a bit around it, that it may try to lift the artwork and push it back and maybe tear it. So I guess I could always just sandwich a thin piece of wood if I had it. I'm not sure if I have anything that thin, because the bit itself is only 3/4 of an inch. But if you could sandwich the artwork down, have maybe a 1/4 inch sheet of plywood, then you could just trim the 1/4 inch sheet of plywood and the artwork to follow the contour of this control panel, and then when you lifted the piece of 1/4 inch plywood off, the artwork should be cut perfectly. So we're just going to see how it works out.